Finance Minister Designate Ken Ofori-Atta has defended the process his ministry took with regard to the procurement process on the AGYAPA deal. Speaking before the Appointments Committee of Parliament Thursday, Mr. Ofori-Atta said the former Special Prosecutor Martin Amidu releasing a corruption and anti-corruption risk assessment report of the transaction without discussing it with the appropriate quarters was a disservice to the country's democracy. He dismissed suggestions of conflict of interest as far as data bank's involvement in the controversial AGYAPA deal is concerned.
Or your policy is to reintroduce the AGYAPA royalties deal. Can you give us the assurance that he's seeking to appoint transaction advisors in the future? You'll be compliant with Article 1815 of the Constitution and the decision in Attorney General versus Faro Atlantic Company Limited.
Mr. Chairman, I think I mentioned a fundamental flaw in the approach that the OSP took with regards to whether he gave us a chance to respond or not. And I think that should be of keen interest to this House as just a rule of law. And so to then go on to accept, acknowledge a document in which your citizens were not able to give their views on that, I think it's something that we should not encourage. I do not feel that we broke any rule, and I think the AG will be able to give you a firm assessment of that. Really, there's quite a bit of cynicism with that transaction. And for me, for the House, for such a report to be put out to the public without us or myself as Minister of Finance having a chance to discuss it, I think is a disservice to our democracy. And that is such a fundamental right that I think we all as a people should be careful about such things. And so the speculative issues and the risk associated with most transactions, discussions by resubmitting to Parliament would enable us to work those things out so that it is. But we should also note, I mean, beyond that, and the reason why I brought the Act up was the Act was well debated and put into motion. I think risks are part of every investment that you make. Parliament gives me the honors to go and raise bonds. So Parliament gives me the mandate to raise $2-3 billion with all sorts of risk. And so far, these 3 years, we have brought the best pricing that the country or comparable countries could enjoy. I do not know why that type of performance will then not reflect in the way in which that report was put.
Is that the government is working on sealing judgment debt leakages and the impact it has on the economy. Government, he says, has tried very hard to renegotiate after the court judgment. We apologize for that mix-up there. We will bring you that soundbite. But on the LGBTQ debate and reports that donor partners are tying it to aid, Ken Ofori-Atta indicated the Kufuor government will not accept any financial assistance if it comes with that condition.
The US and other Western nations have made recognition of LGBTQI rights as some of the conditions under which support will be granted to such nations. As the man who follows up on every negotiation that the President makes on issues of our support, what is your take on this conditionality by the Western nations in order to advance support and aid to a country like Ghana?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'm not clear that it's been established that it's a conditionality. But truly, I mean, for example, if you look at the decision the President took with regards to termination of PDS, in which $190 million therefore had to be left on the table. I think our sociology and our traditions are the most important enduring legacy that we have. And so we'll make decisions that suit our Ghanaian purpose so that we can develop in the way we want to develop.
Let's now hear what he had to say, the Finance Minister had to say about judgment debts.
Acceptable growing of judgment debts, all of it occasioned by an act of omission or commission on behalf of ministers of state. They commit the state and then abrogate contracts. The phenomena of judgment debt. What do you intend to do about that as Minister for Finance should you get confirmed? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I think, as a corollary to the expenditure commitment issue would be a situation where you don't even get there because it can't even come through. But even with judgment debts, I think we have tried very hard to even renegotiate after the court's judgment. So yes, it's a leakage that we are very aware of and would like to blunt.
Right, the Finance Minister also spoke about a number of things, including PDS and what government is doing about it. He indicated that government hasn't abandoned the idea of bringing in private sector participation in the ECG or run management of ECG. He also indicated we introduced some taxes this year to see whether we can close the gap between what ECG pays and the tariffs that they get. He also talked about the banking sector, and he said he thought the confidence in the banking sector is better than yesterday. Akufo-Addo's vision of adding value to all of our natural resources is the way to go. And then he said there are a number of things that we are trying to do to protect the public purse. Vetting of the Finance Minister Designate continues on Friday. In other news, implementation of the 3% withholding tax by the Ghana Revenue Authority has been described as a failure by the Africa Center for Energy Policy, citing a study it conducted. According to the study, 95% of small-scale miners sampled said they never received tax certificates for the 3% withholding tax retained by gold buyers. This comes on the heels of a leaked document from the Precious Minerals Marketing Company revealing that since the introduction of 3% withholding tax, the purchase and export of gold has been on the decline. It also follows a Joy News documentary which revealed widespread smuggling of gold with the connivance of politically connected persons. My colleague Emefa Apau joins me with details of the PMMC document. Emefa, I know you are online, but I'll come to you shortly. Let's first take a look at the study by ACEP with Executive Director Ben Boakye. Thank you very much, Mr. Boakye. What do you say about the 3% withholding tax regime and why you say it has been a failure?
Thank you for having me. I think that the challenge we identified at the time was that you are seeking to tax a regime that you didn't really take time to understand, and therefore it was unlikely that GRA was going to realize the imposition of the 3% withholding tax. And our caution at the time was that if they went ahead to impose the tax, it's going to be a further incentive for those who were already into smuggling and already underreporting their output to the authorities to deepen that. So we thought it wasn't the right approach because GRA has no way of establishing output for which you will be able to apply the 3% withholding tax. So our conversation really was trying to understand what the challenges were from the perspective of the miners and also look at the challenges that we could identify to be impeding the state's ability to collect taxes from the small-scale sector. And we realized that if you couldn't account for outputs, you didn't have any mechanism to ensure that you can track output, and coupled with the porous border and the fact that these gold merchants could move the products out of Ghana and export from there, you were only chasing what was impossible to actually collect. So we proposed that instead of taking a 3% withholding tax, just issue a flat rate postage stamp of 500, which the miners had actually agreed to pay to GRA at the time. If you did that, that allowed you to get data from the miners on how much they actually produce. And that also informs policy on what to do to actually benefit from the small-scale sector. But the engagement with GRA didn't yield much, and they persisted in imposing the 3% withholding tax. So we are not surprised that it has contributed to massive evasion, and PMMC is struggling today because nobody wants to sell to them, but rather sell to other gold dealers who may be able to smuggle the product out of the country.
Right. One of the other things you found out was that about 95% of the small-scale miners you sampled said even though they had paid the withholding tax or had been retained by the people they sold the gold to, they never received receipts. How does that relate to the failure of the system?
No, anybody who pays withholding tax is supposed to get certification from GRA to say that, yes, we have received your deductions from the person who deducted the money. But these gold miners never followed up to get their withholding tax certificates, and the gold buyers also never bothered to really do that. And what was even intriguing is that in most cases, the gold buyers don't even issue the withholding certificate. They will tell you whether you want withholding. If you say yes, that comes at a different price. If you don't want withholding, it comes at a different price. So right. For many of the gold producers, they prefer to go without withholding tax. But the few that were paying, about 95% of them never got withholding tax. So what that could also meant was that some of the buyers would take the withholding tax, but may never pay
to GRA. But could it also be, as you indicated, that most of these small-scale miners never followed up with the GRA? Could it be that the GRA may have issued the certificates, but they never picked them up?
So GRA issues a certificate to the one who deducted the withholding. So the gold buyers are supposed to be the ones to send the certificate to the gold producers. So if the buyers are not sending the withholding tax, or they are not following up with GRA, GRA on its own doesn't issue the certificate unless you go for it. All right. So they are supposed to issue a certificate to the gold buyers, and they would send a certificate to the gold producers. But because the gold buyers were not demanding the certificates, it was never issued to them. And chances are, if you are not demanding, we just keep it and not pay to GRA. And it shows that not much revenue is actually collected from the small-scale mining sector. If you check gold taxes, it's largely the large-scale miners who are paying the taxes. So it tells you that even though the small-scale constitutes about 50% of our gold output, we are not able to tax as much as we tax the large-scale miners.
Now, how do you also explain the link between gold export and money laundering as captured in the study?
Yes, so every gold that you export, you are supposed to account for that export and repatriate the proceeds to Ghana. And it is by law, Bank of Ghana requires that gold exports are accounted for and the proceeds are repatriated. But what some of these merchants that we have in this country do is that they engage the gold buyers and they give them cedis from their operations in Ghana to buy the gold. And then in return, they take the dollar offshore. So it is difficult for GRA to track how goods are imported into the country and how much those goods actually are worth, because you don't see transfers moving through the banks for you to be able to track the cash transfers that are made to foreign accounts for the importation of goods. So you can't track that. GRA doesn't have a system to be able to track that once they go through the gold channel. So most of them do that. They buy the gold through the gold buyers, and then they take the dollar offshore and they bring in imported goods, sell it, and then the cycle continues. So that's how they trade, and it's an area that GRA will have to really look into to ensure that that practice actually stops. Otherwise, you are not going to be able to tax appropriately.
All right. Thank you very much, Ben Boakye. Ben Boakye is with the Africa Center for Energy Policy. Now